Let's look at those edge rushers, trying to pair somebody with Myles Garrett. And there are a couple of guys you like. We're going to start with Ngakoue. Tell me what you like about him, and tell me what you think the Browns see in Ngakoue.
Yeah, Yannick Ngakoue is a player that really, since leaving Jacksonville, just needs to find a home. Only 25 years old. He had played last season both for the Vikings and the Ravens. And he's a guy that the Browns were circling a year ago, right before the Vikings acquired him. Mary Kay Cabot has reported, well as she always does, that Yannick was switching agents. It became just kind of a messy situation, and the Browns ended up losing out on that. And then when he was dealt to the Ravens, it was just another thing where the Browns stayed out of it. But all that went by was a year, right? And teams can circle back, and players can be in a quote unquote better place and just have a better idea of where to call home. And Cleveland could be a place like that for Yannick. Now, again, and just I want to set the precedent now as we go through this. I'm not reporting anything. I have not heard anything on this. I'm just telling you what fits could work for these said players. And Yannick is a guy who makes sense in Cleveland, both scheme-wise. He's a traditional defensive end that you can put his hand in the ground and play an end to bookend the other side with Myles Garrett. And he's a guy who has got the youth opposite of J.J. Watt, someone you could build long-term next to Myles Garrett.
Another guy is a guy in the division, Carl Lawson. Now, the Bengals may end up franchising him. They got a couple weeks still to decide that. But again, this is a guy that's young, 4 years into the league. What do you like about him? What do you see from him?
I love Carl Lawson. I actually like him more than Yannick Ngakoue. I think he's got a diverse bag of moves to get after the quarterback. A guy who really just playing in Cincinnati, you haven't been able to hear about over the past few years because they've been struggling. But slowly, Cincinnati's been building a pretty talented defense. And I'd be surprised if they let him go. It'd be a huge blunder if they did let him walk for nothing. A franchise tag seems to make sense. Keep him there for another year, try to figure this out. But if for any reason he becomes available, I think you're landing a top 15 edge rusher under the age of 30, and you're also making a division opponent weaker, which will be a theme with someone else we're talking about. But when you can take care of two things at once there, it would seem like a no-brainer to me. I just don't know how available he actually is.
Let's look guys that are a little bit older, and some of these guys are coming off injury, so you might be able to get them, on a deal, especially with the salary cap being what it's going to be this year. First one I'm going to start with is Melvin Ingram from the Chargers. You see, knee injury, only played 7 games. He's on the other side of 30. But if you can get him at a reasonable rate, it's not too long ago that this guy was a Pro Bowler 3 consecutive years.
Yeah, that's all accurate, and it makes a lot of sense. I'm going to push back on Melvin Ingram and really, as a point for Browns fans to understand this, when it comes to the type of edge rusher the Browns are looking for. If you look at Melvin Ingram, that graphic just put up 6'2", 250, right? Myles Garrett is about 6'4", 272. Okay, that's he's a freak of nature. Let's be more realistic. All right, well, Olivier Vernon is 6'3", about 255, 260. So you can see where I don't think that Melvin Ingram matches with the type or the prototype edge rusher that they're looking for. I could be wrong, and there are guys who are undersized who can play traditional defensive end and still be productive. Again, though, he's on the wrong side of 30. I think undersized for exactly what the Browns are looking for. So I just don't think the match would make sense. But again, numbers matter, and if it's a waiting game and Melvin Ingram, due to injury, is a guy who can't find a spot and the Browns can swoop in on a 1-year deal, we saw that be a theme last year with veterans, and perhaps Ingram lands in that group.
And again, we're going to look another guy that's coming off an injury that is kind of a hybrid. This guy from the Steelers, in Bud Dupree. Now, Dupree suffered a torn ACL. It came out earlier this week that reports from his camp are that he will be ready for training camp. A little bit bigger. He's kind of a hybrid defensive end. You see 8 sacks, 8 tackles for loss in 11 games, playing opposite J.J. Watt's younger brother, T.J. Watt. So he was kind of that bookend that was a terror. And, Browns fans saw that earlier in the year when they played them. Bud Dupree.
Yeah, that ACL tear in Week 12 is a bit concerning. You usually want 9 months to a year. I know reports say they'll be ready There's not many reports that would say otherwise of players coming back from injury. Those are usually put out by the agents trying to generate good press and drive up those free agent offers and deal with the medical stuff later. But again, this is just an ACL injury, and we're blessed to live in a time where I can say that, just an ACL injury. Of course, there used to be a time 20 years ago when these things were devastating. Nothing to worry about anymore. You pointed out the size of Bud Dupree. For that reason, I would be very intrigued. The Browns bringing him in. He came out of school as a defensive end, a traditional on the hand on the ground edge rusher. The Steelers, due to his versatility, were able to just stand him up and play him as a stand-up edge rusher, meaning he's versatile. He can do it all. He's played in multiple systems. I think he's going to attract, that $12, $13 million range. It's a tough spot to be in. If the cap was higher, to go back to answer your question, like what players made the Browns avoid due to the cap being lower, this might be another one of them. Like I said, J.J. Watt was, just because it might not be worth the risk with a lower number and coming off injury. But you can't discredit the production. You can't discredit his size and the natural fit he'd be next to Myles Garrett.
All right, another guy, and this one you're not gonna like the size on this one either. Hassan Reddick from the Cardinals is listed as a linebacker. Having said that, he was playing inside. They moved him back outside this year, and he got after it with 12.5 sacks. So that 12.5 sacks was after they decided, boy, he was really effective as an edge rusher in college. Maybe because he's 6'1", we can just put him at edge and let him get after the quarterback. And he had 12.5 sacks. So he was played out of position in Arizona. Again, he's only done it for a year, which would lead you to believe the dollar figure won't be nearly as high as maybe that production would be otherwise.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that 5 of those sacks came against the New York Giants, which still credit to him. You got to get the sacks, right? But something happened there where he got like half of his year production in one game. So you tell me that he's playing out of position. What I'm decoding from all that information is simply you're looking at a really athletic, talented defensive player who, quote, really doesn't have a position, doesn't have a home. He would need a system, a creative defensive coach to really unlock him and put him in right spots. Not saying Joe Woods isn't capable, but I just don't think it's a problem that the Browns would be interested in bringing in when they have bigger issues and bigger fish to fry, quite frankly.